As I was prepping for today's deep dive going through Stephen's analysis, what really struck me was how he weaves together these ancient prophecies with stuff that's literally in today's headlines.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling.
It really is. We're about to explore a truly profound question, one that's captivated thinkers, believers for centuries, really. It's about the identity, the role of a figure who's so central to prophetic texts, the Antichrist. Is this figure foretold to be Jewish or perhaps Muslim or maybe something else entirely? This deep dive, I think it really puts our mission at being that shortcut to being well-informed properly to the test.
Definitely.
Our source today, it's an in-depth discussion with a Messianic Jew named Stephen from the YouTube channel Eliezer Lopez, and he goes deep into biblical prophecy, current geopolitics, these striking historical parallels, all to explore this really complex topic. So our mission for you, our listener, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge here, look at the different interpretations, and just understand why these ancient prophecies, why they still resonate so powerfully today.
And what's fascinating, I think, about the source material is how it doesn't just give you one answer. It's not like, here it is.
No, not at all.
Instead, it kind of invites us, doesn't it? Invites us to consider multiple options and, crucially, the biblical verses that support them. It encourages a really thoughtful exploration.
Yeah, not just predictions.
Exactly, not definitive predictions. This deep dive is, it's really about understanding that intricate tapestry, belief, history, prophecy, how it all weaves together to form these compelling theories. We'll be connecting some very ancient texts with very modern tensions, especially tensions centered around, probably one of the most disputed pieces of real estate in the entire world.
Absolutely. And Stephen, he's quite candid. He admits up front, look, I don't have a 100% answer. But what he does is lay out the possibilities, the reasoning behind them, in this really thorough yet open-minded way.
Which is great.
Exactly the kind of exploration we love to bring you. So get ready, because this is where it gets, really interesting. And maybe a little bit provocative too. Okay, so our journey, trying to understand the potential identity of this Antichrist figure, it begins quite literally at ground zero. We're talking Jerusalem's Temple Mount.
Right, the absolute epicenter.
It really is. This isn't just any piece of land, is it? It's a powder keg, a geographical and spiritual battleground. Our source highlights it as, arguably the most tense place on the planet.
I can definitely make that case.
It's the very heart of the conflict between Judaism and Islam. A place where history, faith, political ambition, they just collide with this unimaginable force. It creates a tension that, honestly, it feels almost designed for some kind of explosive resolution.
Indeed. And the historical context here is it's absolutely crucial to get your head around.
Yeah.
The source reminds us, back in 1967, the Six-Day War, Israel conquered Jerusalem. Now, from a Jewish perspective, the Temple Mount holds this immense, almost incomparable significance. According to Jewish tradition, various prophetic texts, it is the only place, the single location on earth where the third temple can ever be built.
No plan B.
No plan B, no other viable location. This isn't just, a preference. It's a deeply held religious conviction, a divine commandment, really. With centuries of expectation, of longing behind it, it's woven into the very fabric of Jewish identity and hope.
And what stands directly on this incredibly sacred site for Judaism, basically preventing any such construction.
Well, there it is.
A monument holy to Islam, the famous Golden Dome, the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah, instantly recognizable.
So if you want to understand where the core conflict between Judaism and Islam really manifests in a physical, undeniable way, you just have to look at that one spot.
It's right there.
For many religious Jews, Stephen explains, this Islamic monument isn't just, a foreign structure on their land. It represents an abomination.
Strong word.
Very strong word. It signifies another religion with its different sacred text. The Quran smack bang on a site they believe is exclusively reserved for their God, for their worship, as laid out, way back in the Old Testament. It's not just about sharing space. It's perceived as a spiritual desecration.
And when we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes really clear this isn't just some simple land dispute, right?
Oh, far from it.
It's a profound, almost intractable clash of deeply held religious beliefs, competing historical narratives. The sheer physical presence of the Dome of the Rock directly conflicts with this deeply ingrained prophetic expectation within Judaism for a rebuilt temple.
It creates this inherently unstable situation.
Totally unstable. The very ground beneath their feet is a constant source of tension, a symbol of these unresolved spiritual claims. And this fundamental conflict, Stephen suggests, well, it isn't accidental. It's almost like a stage that's been set for a specific kind of intervention.
And it's not just some ancient conflict either. It plays out in very real-world dilemmas for the modern state of Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
Daily. Stephen shares this fascinating, almost unbelievable detail from right after the Six-Day War in 67. Immediately after they conquered Jerusalem, the chief rabbi of the Israeli army reportedly gave an order: destroy that mosque.
Wow, just like that.
Can you imagine the sheer audacity, the global ramifications, the immediate catastrophe if that order had actually been carried out? It just speaks volumes about the depth of feeling involved.
Absolutely. But the Israeli government, thankfully perhaps, stepped in. They prevented the destruction.
Right.
Well, their reasons, as the source explains them, were layered. Pragmatic, really. Crucial for survival. First, there was this strong desire to demonstrate non-aggression, show respect for Muslim holy sites.
Good PR, maybe?
Partly, yeah.
Yeah.
It was newly won territory, right? Appearing as conquerors bent on destruction would have been disastrous internationally. Could have undone any diplomatic gains.
Makes sense.
Secondly, and perhaps far more critically, there was this very real existential fear of reprisal. Stephen points out the stark reality. You've got roughly 50 Muslim countries in the world, stretching from North Africa all the way to Southeast Asia, but only one tiny Jewish state.
Yeah, the numbers aren't great.
Destroying such a globally sacred Muslim site could easily have provoked a massive, immediate regional war, potentially uniting all Muslim nations against Israel. That's a threat no small nation could possibly withstand.
So the situation today is Israel controls Jerusalem politically, they maintain sovereignty, but they allow Muslims to maintain very specific conditions on the mosque itself and the Temple Mount Plaza around it.
It's a tightrope walk.
It creates this incredibly precarious balance, doesn't it? A daily, visible tension. You have this fervent religious desire for building the third temple, which is a core messianic expectation for many Jews actively constrained by these immediate political military realities.
Yeah, it's a constant, visible struggle. Spiritual aspirations versus the harsh realities of geopolitical survival.
It's like a pressure cooker, isn't it? With a lid constantly threatening to just blow right off.
That's a good analogy. And this political constraint, it's led to this highly controlled environment, which naturally fuels resentment, frustration, probably on both sides.
How so?
Well, Muslims currently don't permit any Jew to actually enter the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself. Jews are only allowed onto the broader Temple Mount Plaza during specific, very restricted hours.
Okay.
And even then, it's under extremely tight surveillance. The rules are incredibly strict. No reading the Bible allowed, no praying, and certainly no discussing the temple or anything that could even be perceived as a Jewish claim to the site.
Wow. Stephen actually recounts this personal story that just perfectly illustrates how volatile it is.
Oh, yeah.
He once entered the Temple Mount area, and he just happened to have a photo of a temple model in his backpack, simply because he was working as a guide, had shown it to tourists earlier that day.
Okay. Seems innocent enough.
You'd think. But Israeli police immediately stopped him, told him, nope, you can't enter with that. Their fear was palpable, he said. Displaying anything related to the temple, even just a photograph, could instantly ignite violence. Stone throwing, riots, other aggressive acts from those who see it as this, unconscionable provocation, an attempt to seize control.
It's walking on eggshells, constant.
Exactly, a powder keg.
And you can just imagine the deep frustration this causes among many religious Jews, right?
Absolutely.
They look at the Israeli government, the government they elected, which possesses the military, the political might, and they believe it has the power. The power to remove the Muslims from the mosque, bring in the bulldozers, destroy the Dome of the Rock, and then finally build the third temple.
But they don't.
But they don't. They see the government held back by fear, unwilling to provoke this wider, potentially catastrophic conflict, and this perceived inaction, as Stephen explains it. He suggests it isn't accidental.
What do you mean?
He suggests the enemy, which is a term often used in these circles to refer to a kind of dark, orchestrating spiritual force, has been planning this specific stalemate for years, specifically setting the stage for a unique political and religious vacuum.
Creating a need.
Precisely, creating fertile ground for a figure with immense power who can promise a resolution, some charismatic individual who could step into this impossible situation and offer a seemingly miraculous instant solution to a centuries-old problem.
That sets the stage perfectly, then, for the Antichrist's anticipated role in this whole drama.
Exactly.
If the Temple Mount is the epicenter, the flashpoint, then the Antichrist is envisioned as the very figure who steps into that impossible situation, the one who somehow resolves this intractable conflict.
Yeah, the ultimate deal maker, perhaps.
The core idea is that the Antichrist isn't just, a political leader. He's seen as a person of immense political power, possibly military power, maybe even supernatural power. And this power will be the key to resolving what seems utterly unresolvable, this centuries-old fight over the Temple Mount.
He'd be like the ultimate geopolitical tightrope walker, wouldn't he? Succeeding where generations of seasoned diplomats have completely failed.
Totally.
Precisely. The source suggests that this immense power will enable him to broker an unprecedented peace agreement between Jews and Muslims. And this isn't just any peace deal.
No.
It's one that fundamentally alters the landscape of the most disputed holy site on earth. This implies the Antichrist will capitalize on these existing deeply entrenched tensions, offering a solution that appears utterly impossible through, conventional diplomatic or political means.
So he has to be.
Yes.
So incredibly charismatic, persuasive.
All of the above. And perhaps, as Stephen alludes to, maybe even possess some kind of supernatural abilities. He mentions the possibility of him performing miracles, things that would convince people, overcome that deep-seated religious and historical animosity, convincing both sides that he holds the key to their long-awaited dreams.
Wow. Okay, now here's where the prophetic connection gets really intriguing and maybe a bit chilling. While the Bible doesn't explicitly state that the Antichrist will, pick up a hammer and build the third temple himself,
right,
it does say he will place the abomination of desolation in the sacred place, which is pretty much universally understood to mean the temple itself.
Yeah, the holy place.
So the logical deduction seems pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
If the Antichrist places something in the temple, then the temple must be built, either before he rises to power or at least during his rise.
It has to exist first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has to exist for the act of desecration to even happen. He needs the stage built before he can perform his ultimate sacrilegious act.
And this ties directly, neatly, into a critical Jewish messianic expectation.
Oh, so.
From a traditional Jewish perspective, one of the primary conditions, one of the main things they expect the Messiah to do, is to rebuild the temple. For many Jews, the construction of the temple is a foundational sign of the Messiah's arrival, his reign. It's the physical manifestation of God's presence returning to Israel. So this creates a powerful convergence, doesn't it?
Yeah, I see it.
A scenario where the Antichrist could potentially fulfill a key messianic expectation for the Jewish people by facilitating or maybe even initiating the temple's construction. And by doing that, he gains their trust, their allegiance as their long-awaited leader.
So what does this all mean then? The Antichrist, in this interpretation, he isn't just a destroyer. Initially, he's a builder, or at least he orchestrates the building. The very structure that allows him later on to commit the ultimate sacrilege. It's like this calculated deception wrapped up in a promise of peace, perfectly tailored to the long-held hopes and dreams of a people.
Exactly. He offers the solution to an impossible problem, earns their trust, their reverence, before revealing his true, insidious nature.
It's a grand illusion, designed to mimic but ultimately pervert the true messianic promises.
That's the idea. Stephen's theory posits that the Antichrist will possess such overwhelming political and religious power that he can actually convince Muslims to relinquish control of one of their holiest sites, specifically the Dome of the Rock.
Which seems unthinkable now.
Utterly unthinkable, thereby allowing Jews to build the third temple. This is a monumental feat, one that seems impossible without a figure of truly extraordinary influence, charisma, and perhaps, those deceptive miracles Stephen mentioned, convincing masses of people to compromise on these deeply held religious tenets.
He'd have to be a masterful manipulator.
Well, master manipulator.
And here's where we see this potential really fascinating convergence of expectations.
Right.
It's possible, Stephen suggests, that this single figure could align with what both major religious groups are waiting for.
Okay, how would that work?
Well, Islam, for example, widely awaits the Mahdi, right? A messianic figure who will appear at the end of times.
Yeah, the Mahdi.
And Judaism, of course, awaits their Messiah, who they believe is definitely not Yeshua or Jesus, as Christians believe.
You're correct.
So the Antichrist, in Stephen's estimation, could potentially be a Jew who somehow also fits the Muslim expectation of the Mahdi.
A Jewish Mahdi.
Kind of. Imagine the implications. A Jewish leader who maybe makes reforms within Islam says something truly groundbreaking like, look, I am Jewish, yes, but I am also the Mahdi your religion awaits. I'm here to bring peace, justice to the world. This kind of blended identity would be absolutely key to his global acceptance.
The sheer audacity of that proposed deception, it's quite staggering, isn't it?
It really is.
Imagine the global impact. This charismatic leader bridging the seemingly unbridgeable gap between two major religions, bringing them together over the world's most contested holy site. And as you said, the source suggests he might even perform miracles to gain acceptance, further cementing his credibility with both groups, maybe even aligning with prophecies about wonders and signs.
It's not just political then. It's profoundly spiritual deception.
Deeply spiritual, twisting existing prophecies to create this false messianic hope that could just sweep the globe.
Okay, to really get our heads around the depth of this potential deception, we probably need to touch on the fundamental differences in messianic expectations, right, between Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism.
That's crucial, yeah, because it explains why certain groups might be susceptible to a particular kind of deception.
So from the Christian perspective, we believe in two comings of the Messiah.
Right.
The first coming was Yeshua, Jesus. He came to die for sins, offering individual salvation, spiritual atonement.
The Lamb of God.
Exactly. The second coming, which hasn't happened yet, is expected to bring global salvation, a physical reign on earth, judging nations, establishing world peace, and leading all nations to worship the God of Israel through the Messiah. Distinct phases, but connected.
Okay, so two comings. Now, contrast that with traditional Rabbinic Judaism. This raises that important question. Why the difference? Because it profoundly impacts how each group would recognize their awaited figure.
Right.
Traditional Rabbinic Judaism, as Stephen describes it, does not believe in a first coming for salvation from sins in the Christian sense.
They don't see the need for that kind of sacrifice.
Essentially, no. They have their own intricate system for expiating sins through things like Torah observance, repentance, good deeds, and historically the sacrificial system when the temple stood. From their viewpoint, they believe they already have a pathway to expiation through adherence to God's law, so they don't feel the need for a Messiah to come and die for their sins.
Okay, so if they're not waiting for a suffering servant, a sacrifice, what are they waiting for?
They are waiting only for the second coming aspects of the Messiah, as Christians understand them.
The kingly aspects.
Exactly. They expect a Messiah who will be a powerful, victorious king, a warrior even. Someone who will judge the nations, fight against Israel's enemies, gather the Jewish exiles back to Israel, establish a worldwide kingdom of peace centered in Jerusalem, and lead all nations to worship the God of Israel from there.
So no expectation of a prior sacrifice for sins, just a mighty global ruler bringing in a utopian era.
Precisely. And that difference creates a critical opening for the Antichrist figure.
How so?
Well, think about it. If a Jewish figure emerges, someone who achieves global peace, maybe vanquishes Israel's enemies through diplomacy or power, and crucially facilitates the building of the temple, fulfilling their second coming kingly attributes perfectly.
It would align exactly with the Jewish expectation of the Messiah.
Perfectly. Without any need for a prior sacrifice for sins. He would appear to be their long-awaited Redeemer, bringing about the Messianic age right before their very eyes, a seemingly flawless fulfillment of their specific prophecies.
And this leads us right into the idea of the deceptive peace itself, this kind of false dawn that could potentially ensnare millions globally.
Yeah, the setup for the big deception.
Stephen theorizes that if the Antichrist does successfully convince Muslims to maybe not renounce their religion entirely, but at least yield complete control of the Temple Mount, allowing for a third temple.
Which would be seen as a miracle in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if the Jewish people accept this Jewish Messiah figure who also builds the temple, they would be even further convinced that this truly is their Messiah. They'd see all the major signs apparently fulfilled. Global peace, the temple rebuilt, Israel exalted.
It would look like the ultimate victory.
But this peace, as the source makes crystal clear, would be a false peace, a deception.
Right. And it's prophesied to last for a very specific duration.
3.5 years.
3.5 years, also known in biblical terms as 42 months, or 1,260 days. It pops up repeatedly.
And during this intense period, people worldwide, not just in Israel, will genuinely believe they are living in the true Messianic age.
They'll see the Messiah's kingdom being established, global peace, the rebuilt temple, unprecedented harmony, maybe prosperity, maybe supposed spiritual enlightenment. It would make the deception incredibly convincing.
This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, yeah, pretty terrifying. It's not just a political maneuver, is it?
No, it's deeply spiritual.
It's designed to mimic and ultimately pervert the true Messianic promises, a grand illusion on a global scale.
And the expectation is that after these 3.5 years of false peace, then comes the reveal.
The abomination of desolation.
Exactly. An idol, a statue. Stephen even speculates, connecting to some biblical descriptions, maybe even a talking robot or some advanced AI, an image that's given breath to speak, placed in the Holy of Holies of the newly built temple.
And at that point, the truth comes out. The mask drops.
And people realize they were tragically, utterly mistaken about the figure they hailed as their Redeemer.
Wow. Okay. This brings us to another really crucial point for understanding biblical prophecy, which the source covers well. This concept of shadows or precursors.
Ah, yes, the historical echoes.
The Antichrist who is to come, Stephen explains. He's the final one, right? The ultimate manifestation of this evil. But he's definitely not the only one.
Right. History, Stephen suggests, has seen many shadows, you could call them, or earlier versions, precursors, who in their actions, their characteristics, foreshadow the ultimate Antichrist.
Like historical dress rehearsals.
That's a perfect way to put it, yeah. And it's a concept that beautifully parallels the understanding of the Messiah, too, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, just as figures like King David or Joseph in Genesis or Moses, they're often seen as shadows of Yeshua. They performed similar deeds or said similar things that prefigured the true Messiah.
Okay, I see the parallel.
So, too, there have been historical figures who act as shadows of the Antichrist. They embody similar destructive or deceptive characteristics like extreme self-exaltation, persecution of God's people, spiritual desecration. They give us a glimpse into the methods, the nature of the final figure.
The source mentions a few examples. Pharaoh in Egypt.
Classic example.
Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon.
Yeah.
Even Hitler is mentioned as potentially embodying some of these shadow characteristics.
Individuals who exalted themselves, oppressed God's people, tried to defy divine authority on a grand scale, much like the final Antichrist is expected to do.
But among all these potential shadows, Stephen identifies one figure as a truly striking, really detailed parallel. Someone who offers almost a historical template for understanding the Antichrist.
And this raises that important question. Why is this specific historical parallel considered so crucial?
Yeah.
According to Stephen, the figure who most closely resembles the Antichrist in history is Antiochus V Epiphanes. His story is primarily found in the book of Maccabees.
Antiochus Epiphanes, okay.
And his actions, they serve as this kind of template for understanding the Antichrist's methods: deception, brutal persecution, desecration of the temple, and crucially, a fixed period of false reign. It's like a historical blueprint for future prophetic fulfillment.
So what did he actually do?
Well, Antiochus conquered Jerusalem back in the 2nd century BC, and he committed an act that profoundly shocked and traumatized the Jewish world at the time. He converted the temple of God in Jerusalem into a temple dedicated to the Greek god Zeus, or Jupiter, the Roman equivalent.
Right in the temple.
Right in the temple. He then placed a statue of Zeus, likely in his own image, in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the temple, and he brutally forced Jews to bow down to it, persecuting, even executing those who refuse to violate their conscience and worship idols.
That's horrific.
Absolutely horrific. And here's that detail that, given its prophetic significance, Stephen says you just cannot ignore as mere coincidence.
What's that?
This statue, this abomination, remained in the temple for exactly 3.5 years.
3.5 years, the same duration.
The exact same duration prophesied for the Antichrist's future reign of terror and deception.
That is uncanny.
It's a detail that's just too specific, too resonant with prophecy to easily dismiss. It serves as this powerful prefigurement.
So what happened after the 3.5 years?
After that period, the Maccabees, a group of Jewish rebels led by Judah Maccabee, they managed to liberate Jerusalem. They tore down the idol, cleansed and purified the temple, rededicated it to God. And that event, that rededication, is still celebrated today as Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights.
Ah, so that's the historical origin of Hanukkah.
That's the historical core of it, yes. This historical event provides a clear, powerful prefigurement of the future actions of the Antichrist, and also, importantly, the ultimate triumph over his desecration. It serves almost as a historical guarantee of God's eventual victory.
Now, a common doubt often comes up when we talk about the book of Maccabees, doesn't it?
Well,
Especially for people maybe less familiar with it or its place in different Bibles.
yeah, the whole apocryphal question.
Right. Many apocryphal books, things like the Book of Enoch or Jubilees, they're sometimes seen by Protestants mainly, as containing fables, maybe fantastical stories about dragons or giants, kind of blurring the line between history and myth.
Sure.
So the natural question is Maccabees different? Is it solid history, or is it potentially another one of these fables, given its sometimes contested status?
That's a really great point, and the source offers some crucial clarity here. Stephen explains that, yes, the Catholic Church included Maccabees in its biblical canon for centuries. That led to some confusion when Protestant reformers later removed it, grouping it with other apocryphal books they deemed non-canonical.
Okay.
However, Stephen clarifies something important. Maccabees is not considered an inspired word of God in the same way canonical books like Daniel or Isaiah are believed to be.
So it's not scripture per se.
Not in the same sense. The author wasn't claiming divine inspiration. He was essentially acting as a historian, documenting events, kind of like an ancient journalist reporting on what happened. It's primarily a historical record, not a prophetic text itself, even though the events it records hold huge prophetic significance.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit, because it's vital to understand, isn't it? Even if a text isn't considered divinely inspired scripture, it can still hold immense historical value, especially if it's backed up by other independent sources.
Absolutely.
So while maybe modern historians might quibble about specific details or dates, written perhaps 50 years after the events, Stephen assures us that the main narrative, the core story of Antiochus Epiphanes, his desecration of the temple, the Maccabean revolt, that whole arc is widely corroborated.
It's not a fable.
No, definitely not a fable. It's a documented historical event.
That's right. The historicity of these core events is widely supported by multiple streams of evidence. You have mentions from prominent Roman and Greek historians of that era confirming Antiochus' reign and his policies in Judea. You have the detailed accounts of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, which largely align with the Maccabean narrative.
Right. Josephus is pretty well regarded.
Very much so. And then you have archaeological evidence providing concrete support too. Coins have been found actually bearing the names of figures like Judah the Maccabee. Identifiable battle locations mentioned in the book have been confirmed through excavations.
Wow. So it's solid ground.
It's pretty solid historical ground, yes. These aren't just stories. They're documented events that provide this powerful prefigurement, a concrete historical template for the Antichrist's actions. And it's also worth noting, Stephen makes a point of distinguishing the historical account in Maccabees from some later rabbinic traditions.
Like what?
Like the famous Hanukkah miracle of the oil lasting 8 days. That story isn't actually found in the book of Maccabees itself. It appears much later in the Talmud. So he's careful to separate the historical record from later religious legend.
That's a useful distinction. Okay, so moving from these really striking historical echoes now to direct biblical prophecy. The book of Daniel seems to offer some specific, maybe even surprising clues about the Antichrist's identity.
Yeah, Daniel is key. The source brings us to Daniel chapter 11, specifically looking at verses 36 and 37. And these verses, they paint this vivid, pretty chilling picture of a future king, laying out his character, his motivations.
What do they say?
Well, the passage describes a king who will do as he pleases, who will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and importantly, speak marvelous things against the God of gods.
Okay, so extreme arrogance.
Hubris. Off the charts. It explicitly states he will prosper until the indignation is accomplished. This prophetically describes a figure with this extreme hubris, a profound God complex, someone who genuinely believes he is God and directly challenges divine authority, not just human authority.
The ultimate narcissist,
Yeah.
seeking worship for himself.
Pretty much. And the context of Daniel 11, just a verse or so before these, also refers back to that significant 3.5-year period we keep talking about, reinforcing the timeline of his dominion.
All right, tying it all together. But here's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? Providing a potential, maybe even shocking clue to his actual origins.
Yes, this is a big one. Daniel 11, verse 37 states, He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors.
Okay, the gods of his ancestors. What's the significance there?
Well, Stephen highlights a crucial linguistic detail here, something that's often overlooked but carries immense weight interpretively. In the Old Testament, that specific phrase, the God of his fathers, or the God of his ancestors, consistently, almost exclusively, refers to one specific deity.
Who's that?
The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Israel. You see it repeated constantly throughout books like Exodus, Deuteronomy, the prophets. It's standard terminology for the God worshipped by the Israelites.
So if this king disregards the God of his ancestors...
The implication, according to this interpretation, is pretty stark. This interpretation means that this seemingly small phrase carries significant weight, potentially altering our entire perception of the Antichrist's identity. It suggests that this king who exalts himself, who disregards the God of his ancestors, well, he must be from the people of Israel.
He'd be Jewish.
That's the implication drawn here. He wouldn't be an outsider, an invader from some foreign land. He would be an insider, someone from within the Jewish heritage.
Wow. That makes the deception even more potent, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Especially for those who are specifically awaiting a Jewish Messiah. He would appear as one of their own, making his ultimate rejection of God, the God of Israel, even more shocking. A profound internal betrayal.
Okay. And Daniel 11.37 continues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It offers another intriguing, though maybe more speculative detail.
Yes, it continues. Nor for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all.
The one desired by women, what's the interpretation there?
Well, Stephen, carefully navigating this verse, offers an interpretation, and he stresses it is an interpretation that the one desired by women could be a hint that the Antichrist will be gay.
Really? That's specific.
It is very specific. And Stephen himself emphasizes, this is an interpretation, not a definitive statement. He actually says in the original Spanish, no sé that, si es yo no, I don't know if it is so or not.
Okay, so acknowledging the uncertainty.
Exactly. But it offers this very specific, though speculative detail about the Antichrist's personal characteristics. If it were true, it might suggest a deliberate rejection of traditional norms or relationships, alongside his ultimate rejection of God. Perhaps a kind of statement of nonconformity and elevation of his own desires above absolutely everything else, including traditional societal expectations.
This raises an important question for us, I think. How much can we really infer from these specific, sometimes ambiguous phrases?
It's the challenge of prophetic interpretation, isn't it?
It really demonstrates the meticulous detail within these prophetic texts, though. It invites us to really deep dive, like we're doing, into every single word, every nuance. Even when interpretations vary, even when they're speculative.
Yeah, it reminds us these aren't just broad strokes prophecies. They often contain these surprising nuances that careful, maybe prayerful study can uncover, adds layers of complexity to the whole prophetic narrative.
Okay, so as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive, we come to a question that probably hangs in the air for many people who follow these prophetic discussions.
The timing question.
Exactly. Will we see the Antichrist in our generation, in our lifetime? Stephen, who, as we've heard, is typically quite cautious, quite measured in his responses. He was asked this directly by the interviewer. Do you believe we will see the Antichrist in this generation before you and I die?
And what did he say?
His answer, maybe somewhat surprisingly, was a strong, pretty unequivocal yes.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is. But while he gave that strong yes, he immediately clarified. He said, look, I am not prophesying. I'm not setting dates.
Okay. Important clarification.
Very important. Instead, he's expressing a deep personal conviction based purely on the sheer number, and maybe the speed, of prophetic fulfillments that he believes we're seeing today.
So reading the signs of the times, basically.
Yep, exactly. He acknowledges, look, it could still be 20 years away, maybe 50 years away. It's not necessarily next week. This seems to balance that sense of urgency with a responsible approach to interpretation, of avoiding the fear-mongering or the speculative date-setting that has historically led to disappointment, maybe even discredited prophecy sometimes.
Yeah, it's about recognizing a season, perhaps, not predicting a specific day or hour.
Right. And his conviction, where does it stem from? He identifies what he sees as the single greatest sign, indicating the nearness of the end times.
Which is?
The return of the Jewish people to their land, the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948, and crucially, their subsequent regaining of control over Jerusalem in 1967.
That's the big one for many prophetic watchers.
He sees it not just as a political event, but as a monumental, almost miraculous fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Explicitly foretold, he argues, in texts like Ezekiel 36 and 37, where God promises to gather his people from all the nations where they've been scattered, bring them back to their ancient homeland.
So that fulfillment is seen as the key indicator, the main sign that the prophetic clock is ticking, and ticking rapidly.
That's exactly how he frames it, ticking rapidly and loudly.
Which then leads us back to that profound question. How do we balance this sense of prophetic urgency, this feeling that things are accelerating, with responsible interpretation?
Yeah.
The source material seems to suggest that while we absolutely cannot and should not set dates, the convergence of geopolitical events, these historical parallels we've discussed, the specific biblical interpretations, it all points towards a heightened sense of anticipation.
A feeling that something's building.
Something like that. Stephen even refers to that passage in Hosea chapter 6, verse 2, which speaks of revival after 2 days.
Okay, after 2 days.
Yeah.
How does that connect?
Well, in prophetic interpretation, a day can often symbolize a much longer epoch. Sometimes a year, sometimes even 1,000 years. Like you see in passages like 2 Peter 3.8, one day is as 1,000 years with the Lord.
The day-year principle or day millennium.
Exactly. Stephen explains how that phrase, after 2 days, is often understood by many interpreters to represent approximately 2,000 years. A timeline that, remarkably, aligns pretty closely with the time that has passed since Yeshua's first coming.
Wow, that adds another layer of, well, biblically rooted urgency, doesn't it, to current events?
It does. It suggests we might truly be living in a unique and profoundly significant historical epoch viewed through that lens.
And he also cites Yeshua's own words, doesn't he? Teachings like, when you see these things happening, know that the end is near.
Right. The command to watch, to be aware.
This knowledge, Stephen emphasizes, it's meant to encourage believers. Encourage them to be prepared, to be vigilant, to be aware of the signs of the times, and maybe to live purposefully in light of them.
But not to instill fear.
Exactly. Not to instill fear, and certainly not to enable us to calculate precise dates, which is something believers are explicitly warned against doing. It's more about understanding the prophetic season we might be in and living accordingly.
Absolutely. It's about being aware of the signs, not trying to predict the exact hour. The profound takeaway, maybe, is that if Israel's return to its land is indeed the most significant prophetic sign, as many believe, then we are certainly living in a unique and profoundly significant time, a time where these ancient prophecies feel more current, more relevant than perhaps ever before.
It definitely encourages us to engage with the world, doesn't it? Not with fear, but maybe with a more informed understanding.
Well put.
Wow, what an incredibly intricate and, definitely thought-provoking deep dive into this whole question of the Antichrist identity and role.
It covered a lot of ground.
It really did. We've journeyed from the volatile landscape of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, digging through ancient biblical texts like Daniel, looking at these striking historical parallels like Antiochus Epiphanes, all to try and understand this complex tapestry of prophecy. We've seen how current events, these deep-seated religious expectations, even subtle linguistic clues in the text, can fuel these compelling theories about a figure who promises peace, but ultimately delivers deception on a global scale. It's a compelling narrative, if a bit unsettling.
Indeed. And this discussion, I think it really underscores that knowledge is most valuable when it's actually understood and applied, right? And that critical thinking is just essential in this world, absolutely overloaded with information.
Yeah.
We've explored how different perspectives, from Messianic Judaism to broader historical records, they seem to converge to paint this picture of a future that is somehow both anciently foretold and yet remarkably relevant to our modern world. It kind of compels us, doesn't it, to look at the news not just as, current events.
Yeah, just headlines scrolling past.
But potentially as unfolding prophetic narratives, urging us to maybe consider the deeper implications of what we observe around us.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? We presented the interpretations, the evidence, as laid out in our source material today, from that really provocative idea of a Jewish Mahdi to the detailed foreshadowing scene in Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yeah, a lot to process.
Definitely. The question of the Antichrist's ultimate identity, whether Jewish, Muslim, some kind of cunning combination of both, or something else entirely, it clearly remains a subject of intense study, debate, and speculation. But one thing seems undeniably clear from the source.
What's that?
The conditions for such a figure to emerge, particularly regarding those simmering tensions, those unresolved spiritual claims surrounding the Temple Mount, those conditions seem incredibly ripe in our world today.
The stage does seem set in many ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you feel a little more well-informed, maybe a little more curious, and perhaps even a little more prepared for the conversations that might lie ahead regarding these pretty profound topics.
Yeah.
What stands out to you from today's deep dive?
Yeah.
How do these ancient prophecies resonate with the world you see around you? Did you make any surprising connections? And maybe consider this final thought. If the Antichrist's arrival is truly heralded, as Stephen suggests, by the return of Israel to its land and these simmering, almost impossible geopolitical stalemates around the Temple Mount, what other seemingly unresolvable global conflicts or major humanitarian crises might be unknowingly setting the stage right now for a figure with such immense persuasive power? A figure capable of offering solutions that maybe defy all conventional logic and diplomacy. It's definitely a question worth pondering.